Hello, and welcome to Tekkenton Tea Talks, where we talk about all kinds of things relating to communications, PR, and journalism. For today's topic, I want to take a time to talk about my background and influences. Today, I want to talk about some of the communication traditions and essentially how that kind of affects like my worldview and how they kind of go back and forth with each other and my approach to knowing. What approach do you think I have? You're going to have to stick around to find out. So I think if we can like go back in the past, like growing up, I was absolutely a church kid. I'm a Christian, and I grew up as the youngest in the family. No sisters. I had 3 brothers. And I think that definitely influences a lot of how I act to this day. I'm like kind of a tomboy, and I'm not like super girly. And I still have like, even now, that kind of like Christian girl guilt, if you've ever heard of that, where I'm just kind of constantly worried about what I'm doing. And then my main thing that I also grew up with was I was a huge artsy kid, and my creative art, if you will, was theater. I grew up in theater from like age 6 till now, constantly performing. So these are kind of all the things that like influence me into who I am. So like just a brief overview of Christianity. Essentially, we believe that God created the heavens and the earth, and that the only way to be saved from hell is through Jesus Christ, his son, who died on the cross for us to basically cover for our sins. That's the general goal. And then we also follow 10 commandments, which if you don't know them, basically, it's you shall have no other gods before me, serve them, you can't have idols. God is the only God, the capital G God. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, which is basically like no swearing. Remember to keep holy the Sabbath day, which means a little bit different for everybody, but for me, it's Sunday is basically the day for church and worship and remembering and honoring him. Honor your father and your mother. That seems pretty simple. You shall not kill. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. So that would be like lying or cheating against them. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife or husband. So, lustful behavior. And you shall not covet your neighbor's goods. So over time, I think like I'm still a Christian. I'm still living that life. And how am I different now versus as a kid? I think I actually grew stronger in faith. I was a kid and I converted to Christianity as like an 11-year-old, but I grew up in the church before that. I had heard the messages, but when you're like 4 years old, you don't really take that in. And then theater was a big influence for me as a child up through now too, because I had a lot of different adults and directors and producers who were a big part of my life and a big influence in my life. And then, of course, I was the littlest kid. I always looked up to my brothers. I always thought they were super cool, and I always wanted to be like them, which is honestly how I got into theater in the first place. My brother did theater. So the tradition that I tend to like the most and that I think I work the best with is the phenomenological tradition, which essentially how it works is the meaning of things consists of the potential of different things. We discover meaning through our own experiences. So for example, I'll give a good example from the previous month. I did very badly on a test in my class. Not like terrible, but like considerably worse than normal. And so someone who like doesn't do very well on a test or maybe fails a test with this type of tradition is more likely to try to pay attention in class better or study for the next one, for example. So like me seeing that like, oh, these are the results that came out of this. I am saying, okay, I did not do well on this test. What can I do to do better? I see the results from before, and I am essentially trying to do better because I'm looking at the potential of the future. If I study for this test harder or I do something different, the potential to do better might produce a better result, if that makes sense. And this is so much of everything in theater. For example, theater, they will put on a show for you, right? They'll have everything that you are seeing. Someone has put a ton of work into try and put in the meaning. However, there's still the potential there for you to make your own interpretation. The directors and the actors can put on their show to try and give you their meaning and interpretation, but it's up to you, the audience member, to try and comb your way through it. So I feel like the best way to talk about this is through like dance. I've seen a lot of dance performances, and even down to like the color that someone might be wearing or that the lights are showing. Like if you were going to talk about like red, for some people, red might mean like passion. It might mean romantic passion and fire. But for other people, it might mean anger. It might mean like distress or like that kind of feeling. These are two completely different interpretations of what's happening in a dance performance. Obviously, there are other things that are going to come from that dance performance, maybe facial expression, maybe the movement itself. But what you are seeing may be very differently interpreted than what other people are seeing. And basically, with the phenomenological tradition, the communication process is seen and perceived differently by different people. So it more or less is like a dialogue back and forth, even for a play where it's not necessarily like, you wouldn't think of that as a dialogue per se. But when a performer's on stage, they are trying to, convey a message to the audience. Maybe it's like, I don't know, I'm a terrible person, I killed this person, and I'm becoming a serial killer slowly. But the audience still is giving their interpretation back through clapping, through laughing, maybe even through their tears during like a sad scene. And the actors can see the feedback they're getting back from the audience. And then it's kind of going back and forth. It's kind of a fun process, honestly. I highly recommend theater if you've never done it before. And given what you've probably heard from me talking before, it's no surprise that I love the interpretive approach. I think that it works extremely well for basically every aspect in my life. And when we look at interpretive approach, we do want to look at it through the three different lenses: the ontology, the epistemology, and the axiology. So ontology is basically just asking if you believe in free will, for example. And for me, that's actually a yes. I know a lot of people who are Christians don't believe in free will, and I'll kind of touch on that in a sec, as to why. Epistemology is like, what is the truth? Is it absolute? Is it subjective? Is it like controlled by something? And for me, it's difficult because in my mind, like with these 10 commandments, there is an absolute truth. However, I recognize that because I'm not the average person, truth is somewhat subjective. The people that I know don't necessarily live by these 10 commandments. And so looking at the truth through different lenses of different people, it's going to come out more subjective. Axiology is like when you're researching how do your values come in? And for me, I'm a Christian. I have to acknowledge my values because I know that my beliefs are pretty different from most people's. And so rather than trying to say I have I don't have any bias whatsoever, it's like, no, I am aware of this and I want to tell people this up front so that way they don't get confused per se. And then I think the reason why I like the interpretive approach, so I mentioned briefly for free will, and the thing that I kind of want to explain is this robot theory, more or less, where people seem to think that Christians think that we don't have free will, that everything is done by God. And that could be true, but God designed us with a free will because if we weren't designed with a free will, we would essentially all be robots. We wouldn't be able to control what we're doing, and we're not actively seeking him. And so, yeah, free will is a big part of our lives. I also want to talk briefly about the rules approach, because I think that this goes extremely well with the interpretive approach. So the 3 types of rules, you've basically got habitual, which there is one authority and it's not negotiable. Or like, for example, if you want to graduate on time, you have to have, what is it, like 124 credits? That's not negotiable at all. You can't get short. You can't be like, I have 96 credits, I can graduate. Like, this is an absolute rule set by authority. You've got paramedic, which is like set by authority, but it is negotiable. So like maybe I had a class where I got an A-, and I went to talk to the professor and I wanted to know why. And he had said I got an A- because I wasn't participating enough in class. I was in a theater class full of people who are way louder than me. And I made my argument saying that I did plenty of work. I was always participating in class. And that actually changed my grade. I did get an A. So this was a negotiable paramedic rule. And then finally, there's the tactical rules, which these are kind of the individual rules you set for yourself, which I feel like is pretty similar to religion. These are the rules that I have set for myself. These are the commandments that I follow. And this goes with my morals. Kind of just a brief thing on just interpretivists. They are scholars who are interested in the ways communities, cultures, or individuals create meaning from their own actions, rituals, interactions, and experiences. They are researchers who look at the meanings of texts and codes and rules. This is everything that we do in theater and music and dance. Even as an audience member, when you're watching a show, you are taking all of your previous experience and knowledge and trying to find connections between that and what is happening on stage that you can understand. It comes down to everything. It can be from the way that the clothes are. Maybe someone's wearing like super fancy clothes. This could indicate that they are a rich character. Or maybe it could convey like their personality. Maybe they are extremely mean or rude. And that's kind of something that we take from our mind of like, oh, sometimes prissy people can be really annoying. Or at least that's me and my interpretive things. And I know that for worldview, for Christianity, a lot of people would be like, how does like interpretation come into Christianity? Like, it's absolute. Like, that's ridiculous. No, because when we're in church on Sunday, what do you think we're doing? We're sitting in the audience and we're taking in the message from the preacher, pastor, and we are attributing meaning to it, either from things we've read in the Bible before. Maybe it's from our own personal experience if we're talking about like miracles or things we believe are miracles. And even though there's not as much of the audience back and forth participation when you are in church, you're still taking something and interpreting it in your head. And I say this because not every Christian thinks the same. Even though we follow the same rules, we follow the Bible, there's so many different like sects of Christianity. So like for me, I'm non-denominational, but there's people who are Catholic and they have a lot of different rules and traditions that they follow. Even meeting someone who's in the same sect of Christianity as you may have a different interpretation of what the Bible means because it's words. Language, I have like a really good example here. It's basically we use our language to attribute meaning to communication. This can be through reading. This can be through body language. This can be through talking as well. Everything, even in the Bible, this is something that we interpret. This is an ancient text. Everyone's going to be reading it slightly differently. And that's why they relate, in my opinion. This relates extremely well to the worldview. This relates to my own history and background. And I think that's about it for this podcast episode. See you soon.